Welcome to the first episode of Unlearning with me, Skhumbuzo Jwara, where each week we discuss a social issue through the lens of a book we have read. This week, we've read two books. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which is a classic. In it, he explores our search for meaning in life told through his harrowing experience as a Holocaust survivor. He concludes that there is no general meaning to life, rather that each of us must find our own personal answers to the question of life, because those answers are unique based on our own personal experiences, circumstances, and relationships. This dovetails well with our second book, A Terrible Kindness by Joe Browning Wroe. It tells the tale of a young man who has graduated from high school and is then forced to make the difficult decision of having to volunteer after a tragic event in a nearby town. It explores the consequences of this choice and how it affects the people he loves and those he cares about, and the outlook he has on life as a result, and how it is he eventually changes what he believes was a certain future. Both of these books were a particularly emotional read for me because they touch on the themes of tragedy and loss, how we respond to it, how it affects us, especially amidst all of the tragic loss while trying to find meaning. I recall a time a few years ago where I was just sitting in a business meeting with my partners, strategizing on how it is that we're going to expand our startup business. And then, like so many of us who were affected, the pandemic hit. And the consequences of the ensuing lockdowns implemented by our governments was devastating on our business. I recall that the only stress I had during that period before the lockdowns was whether I was going to buy a house in Cape Town or Johannesburg, because I loved both cities. I had plans on how it is I was going to financially contribute towards my relatives and perhaps even get married. And like so many other people who were devastated by the consequences of those lockdown measures, people who lost jobs, had to downgrade their lifestyles, had to move from their apartments, perhaps back to homes with relatives and family. It was a difficult time. And naturally, the questions one asks during those periods are, what is it all for if it can all disappear so quickly? Against the backdrop of all the lives that have been lost in the province of KwaZulu-Natal as a result of the floods, and perhaps as a consequence of all of this devastation falling within the religious period of Easter for Christians and Ramadan for the Muslim community, I have read a great many articles, opinion, and think pieces lamenting the existence of a God that would allow all of this devastation and tragedy to take place without intervening or simply remaining silent. Now, whether you're a person of faith, an atheist, or agnostic, when a father loses 4 of his children to a tragic event like a landslide during a storm and decides to find meaning in God, that presents some sort of meaning to his life and is not worth castigating simply because you hold different views. Away from the black swan event that was the pandemic and the force of Mother Nature as experienced through the floods in KZN, there are tragic events that are simply as a consequence of human negligence. One of these have been the devastating fires that ravaged homes in the township of Langa in Cape Town. If you would like to watch a detailed view of inequality in South Africa and how it affects living conditions of the poor versus the rich, particularly in Cape Town, we'll add a link to a Vox video below. The people of Langa have been forced to live in conditions that leave them open to devastating fires that occur every year, simply because administrators, policymakers, and those in power have been unable or simply unwilling to find and create long-lasting and sustainable solutions to their living conditions. Over the last few years, we have been inundated with a copious amount of tragedies told through the media. They've been told through broad narrative that make them seem so enormous in comparison to how it is that we can respond to them and what it is that we can do to contribute. And what's most disheartening is that what is left after all of the media headlines and spotlights have moved away from each tragic event are individuals whose lives are devastated and have to continue to live through it. Fortunately, there are organizations like Gift of the Givers that have been doing work on the ground to assist individuals that have been devastated by these recent tragedies, like the floods in KZN and the ravaging fires in Langa. We're going to add a link below so that you can contribute in any way that you can to their efforts. Now, we are in no way suggesting that reading a couple of books on finding the meaning in life and how tragedy has struck a young boy will somehow cause change. But what it will do is instill a level of empathy that has been missing in how devastating the tragedies have been in the consequence of their enormity. And perhaps in contributing what you can to organizations like Gift of the Givers who are doing the work on the ground, you may be able to find some sort of meaning amidst all of this tragedy.